Thank you, everyone. If you could please stand, if you would like to, for the reading of the Council Prayer and the Acknowledgement of Country, and I'll call upon Councillor Sinfield to read the Council Prayer.
Thank you, Mayor. Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the true welfare of the people of the city of Boroondara. Amen.
Thank you. And I now call on Councillor Franco to read the Acknowledgement of Country.
I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of the land and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you could please be seated. So welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting. Before we commence the meeting, could everyone please ensure that their mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent? Thank you. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website, so you'll be able to view the proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on the council website as soon as possible after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered during the meeting, the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is rectified, or if needed, the meeting will be postponed. My name is Councillor Jane Addis, Mayor of the City of Boroondara, and I'll start by introducing my fellow councillors and officers. So seated to my left at the horseshoe table in the council chamber are Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Nick Stavrou, Councillor Wes Galt, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, and then on the other side from me, Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Gary Thompson and Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth. Officers in attendance tonight: Philip Storer, our Chief Executive Officer, Carolyn McLean, Director Community Support, Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer, Daniel Freer, Director Places and Spaces, Mance Bassi, Director Customer and Transformation, Scott Walker, Director Urban Living, Brian Wee, Manager Governance and Legal, and Elizabeth Manu, Senior Governance Officer. There are also a number of officers who will be in attendance this evening, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. I'd also like to welcome Boroondara Youth Voice, who are joining us this evening. And thank you for your interest and for coming along. So our first item is apologies. Mr. Wee, apologies for this evening.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Biggar and Councillor Gillies are apologies. They're on a leave of absence.
Thank you very much. I believe there are no minutes to adopt. So the next item is declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors and officers, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? Can't see any. Thank you very much. So item 3, deputations, presentations, petitions and public submissions, and I believe there are none other than petitions. Mr. Wee?
Madam Mayor, there's one petition in relation to Myrtle Park.
Thank you. So, councillors, I think you've read them in the read that in the papers. Is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the petition as printed in our business papers? Councillor Park.
So moved.
And a seconder, Councillor Thompson.
Happy to second, thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone opposed to that? No. So I'll declare that carried, given that there's no one opposed. Thank you very much. The next item is informal meetings of councillors. I believe there are none of those to talk about. Thank you. So our next item is number 5, public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a response in writing. And those submitted after 12 will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Mr. Wee, questions this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have 2 questions tonight with notice from one member of the public.
Thank you very much. So our 2 questions are from Mr. Ian Huntley of Balwyn North. And Mr. Huntley, are you? Thank you very much. So the first question is on diversion of cyclists from Hayes Paddock. The question is, please advise the anticipated daily number of cycling trips through Hayes Paddock if the proposed Borrandara bicycle strategy were implemented, including how many of these trips may be diverted away from Hayes Paddock and onto Kilby Road and other routes for the purpose of protecting the amenity of the park in the event that alternative routes are identified, as indicated by Mr. Hondrakis at a meeting with residents on Monday, May 9, 2022 at Hayes Paddock. And thank you, Mr. Huntley. The question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, as the question has previously been put in writing to a councillor and council officer more than 10 days before the meeting. And I'm going to call upon Director Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer, to respond to this question from Mr. Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Unfortunately, Mr. Hondrakis was not at work today for a planned day off, but I'll need to verify some of the answer provided tonight and clarify in writing to Mr. Huntley. The proposal for Hayes Paddock aims to provide access for nearby recreation facilities and schools to encourage walking and cycling. The link is not intended to be a commuter cyclist route, rather it involves formalising an unmade track at the northern end of the reserve which links to Keystone Crescent. The path link is intended to be gravel treatment, similar to the existing gravel paths in Hayes Paddock. Whilst Council does not have data on cycling trips through these locations at this time, it is difficult to accurately predict the likely rise in cyclist usage of these paths. The proposals are focused on maintenance of the existing unsealed paths and are not, as such, are not expected to attract a large increase in cycling activity. For example, a comparison of cyclist numbers on the Anniversary Trail near Chandler Highway and at Whitehorse Road during the period of 2010 to 2019 revealed increases in the order of 0.8% to 2.5%. The proposal to upgrade the existing bike lanes along Kilby Road would be expected to encourage additional cycling along this on-road link as it connects with the main Yarra Trail near the Eastern Freeway underpass, and as previously mentioned, this link already caters for a number of commuter cycling demand into the CBD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. And Mr. Huntley, you will receive a written response in due course. And your second question, Mr. Huntley, relates to budget bid for council funding by Kew Football Club. And the question is, having regard for the fact that senior men's football has been able to be played on the South Oval at Victoria Park, together with the fact that the Victorian Football Association utilises the AFL's Preferred Facilities Guidelines 2019, which identify preferred rather than mandated dimensions for ovals, why is it now being contemplated by Council that Borondara ratepayers should provide $115,000 to fund a project to increase the dimensions of the South Oval to cater for senior women's football. And Mr Huntley, the question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules as it relates to a matter or matters regarding item 7.1 on the Council agenda this evening. And I'll call upon the Chief Financial Officer, Amy Montalti, to respond to this question from Mr Huntley. Thanks. I think it's going to be Ms McLean, is it?
Thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, the Victorian Amateur Football Association has confirmed that if the South Oval at Victoria Park is extended, they will fixture senior women's matches there, which will allow for up to 9 additional games per year. While the AFL guidelines are recommended rather than mandated, Council endeavours to align with them as closely as possible to maintain playability. Without the Oval extension, senior female matches would not be able to be scheduled on the South Oval. Given the benefits to participation and the fact that the club is contributing along with the federal government, officers are recommending Council supports this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms McLean. And Mr Huntley, again, you will receive a written response to your question. So our next item is number 6, notices of motion. Mr Weed, do we have any notices of motion?
Madam Mayor, no notices of motion have been received.
Thank you very much. Presentation of officer reports. Does any councillor have an issue or concern with the respect of the order, or wish to flag any items for discussion, or indeed items that may not need to be discussed and could be moved en bloc? There is a possibility that we could move 7.1, 7.2 and 7.3 en bloc, should councillors wish to consider that. Councillor Thompson?
I'm happy to move those 3 items en bloc.
And seconded, yep, thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Is anyone opposed to moving those en bloc? No? Okay, so we'll do that. So, and I should just mention to the gallery that when we move items en bloc, it means that we've read them in detail and are happy with what the officers have recommended. So we'll now go to, I need to move, sorry. Yeah, did you want to
No, happy.
speak to?
No, happy. I think you summed that up well, Madam Mayor. Just happy to vote.
Thank you. So I'll now put that motion that we move items 7.1, 7.2 and 7.3 en bloc. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now move to 7.5, which is public submissions on the 7.4, I am sorry. We didn't move that one. So 7.4, variation to contract 2018110, contract parking guidance system Q Junction. And that's going to be presented by Paul Mitchellmore, Manager Civic Services. Thanks, Mr Mitchellmore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors. So this report seeks approval for a variation to the existing contract with Database Consultants Australia, or DCA, contract number 2018/110 parking guidance system. The variation is for the implementation of 500 new parking in-ground sensors, or IGS, to the Camberwell Junction precinct, which is included in the annual budget for 2022-23. I'd also like to raise an amended officer recommendation as well, if I may. Thank you. The Council resolved to approach the variation to the contract 2018/110 with DCA for the implementation of 590 new parking in-ground sensors in the Camberwell Junction precinct, subject to the approval of the 2022-23 budget, including funding for this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mitchell-Moore. Councillors, does anyone have any questions for Mr Mitchell-Moore? Councillor Gold.
Thank you. Value for money. Are we confident in extending the existing contract for Q that we are getting value for money, or does compatibility between the systems override that?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm very confident that we're getting value for money. Our recent statistics for parking efficiency has increased 52% over the months of November to January in the Q Junction after our officers returned to normal duties after lockdown.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
If I can extend that question, that represents value for money in putting in the system, but in using the same contractor. Are we confident we're getting value for money with that contract?
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, we are confident. The contractor is the market leader for this technology for local government. We've already invested a significant amount of money in the rollout for the Q Junction. To continue with this vendor would be the most efficient and effective course to continue rolling out into other areas, such as Camberwell Junction. They're also, we currently have strong integration with their technology, with our council systems, so we would like to maintain that integration.
Thank you. Councillor Park, you have a question?
Just like an understanding of the reason for the amended recommendation.
I think Mr Storr is going to address that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed when I was reading the agenda for this evening that the original officer recommendation to a degree preempted the outcome of the budget decision-making process, and I felt it was important that this recommendation be qualified to recognise that approval of this contract should be subject to the formal approval of the upcoming budget.
Supplementary question, are we at risk of price movements if we adopt this approach?
I don't believe so. I think that the tender evaluation has come in with a price commitment to council, so I think that we're entitled to stand by what's been submitted as part of that process.
Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Some questions in relation to the operation of the system in question. Could you advise whether it equally or effectively applies to non-paid parking locations as well as paid parking locations? And I note in this regard, the nature of the answer I'm looking to is with non-paid parking, often it's easier for persons to overstay, betting perhaps on one or two enforcement outings on a day or whatever, as opposed to paid parking. So does this address the enforcement decisions of non-paid parking or just the paid parking locations?
Thank you, Councillor. So at the moment, it currently addresses mostly paid parking. The sensors are being rolled out in precincts which are very busy within a municipality and where we feel they're most needed to help increase parking accessibility and options for people going to those precincts. So in those precincts, they're paid parking at this point in time.
In the precinct and in the precinct that's in question for it to be rolled out, I think there is a significant degree of free parking or free short stay parking, is there not?
So in the Camberwell Junction area, they are going into paid parking specific locations. So that is the plan for this rollout. So we're not targeting any non-paid spaces at the moment because we usually find that they're further away from the shopping centres. So we've gone for the ones closest to the centres that need turnover more regularly.
Okay, thank you.
I can't see any other lights on for questions, so Councillor Thompson.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. And is somebody happy to second that? Councillor Stavro?
I am, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? Maybe not. So look, I'll go back to Councillor Thompson to speak to his motion.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. This is really a motion with regards to efficiency in our car parking systems, and particularly in Camberwell Junction, which is tending to be quite busy, and as Councillor Franco's alluded to, there needs to be additional management with regards to timeliness of those visiting that area. Acknowledging that our ward councillor is not here this evening, I think it is appropriate to move this motion and acknowledge the CEO's additional comments with regards to the premature budget. So, subject to this being incorporated in the budget, look forward to this being implemented.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Stavro, you have your light on? You're right. Councillor Sinfield, you hesitated. You're happy not to speak?
I did hesitate and I'm happy not to speak. I think reading the room, there will be support for this.
Okay, thank you. So look, I'll return to Councillor Thompson to see if there's anything you'd like to add before we put the motion.
No debate equals no response, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So item 7.5, which is public submissions on the proposed budget 2022-23, and that's going to be introduced by Amy Montalti, our Chief Financial Officer. Thanks, Ms Montalti.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors, and through you, Mayor. This report includes details of public submissions received in relation to the proposed 2022-23 budget and provides for the hearing of submissions this evening. On Tuesday, the 26th of April 2022, Council endorsed the proposed 2022-23 budget for public exhibition and community consultation in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020 and Council's Community Engagement Policy 2021/26. Public exhibition commenced on the 28th of April and concluded on the 25th of May. The public notice period has provided an opportunity for additional information to be received from the community in relation to the proposed budget. In total, 39 submissions were received, and copies of all submissions have been included in attachment 1 of the report you have before you. Attachment 2 in your papers summarises all submissions and includes officer comments in response to each submission. In addition to the 39 submissions, 1 further submission was received by officers after the finalisation of this report. This submission has been circulated to councillors for consideration prior to the meeting, including an officer response to this submission as per the table format in attachment 2. This submitter has indicated an intention to speak this evening, along with the 13 submitters who have previously indicated their intention to speak in support of their submission. Subsequent to this report, 3 speakers have forwarded apologies, bringing the total number of speakers this evening to 11. Proceedings tonight are not undertaken with the intent for Council to make a decision, but rather to hear and consider all submissions prior to final adoption of the budget on the 27th of June 2022. Thank you. This concludes the presentation, and I hand back to you, Mayor, to commence the hearing of submissions.
Thank you very much, Ms Montalti. So we have 11 people who have let us know that they wish to speak in support of their written submissions on the proposed budget 2022-23. Before calling people to make their submissions, I just want to bring your attention to a couple of matters to assist with the orderly running of the submissions. So we ask that people speak as clearly and as succinctly as possible to present your viewpoints. There is a 3-minute allowance for each speaker, and at the end of 2.5 minutes, we have a bell that will let you know that you have 30 seconds to go, and if you could start to wrap up at that point. And then after you've spoken, if you could please just wait in your seat for a moment to see if any councillors have any questions of clarification for you. So we'll now start with the 11 people. Now the first one is Michael Daly. If you could come forward and sit at the end of the horseshoe table. And that will be followed by Bob Stensholt. Thank you, Mr. Daly. If you could introduce yourself and tell us your suburb, and then you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Michael Daly. I live in Balwyn. I've lived there for 63 years, and I would like to just read out my submission, please, if that's okay. Having lived in Balwyn for 63 years, I've seen a lot of changes, and I'm aware of the history of my suburb and its surrounds, including increased density and lack of green space on domestic properties. We cannot let our dwindling open space parks be consumed by more concrete, steel and overdevelopment, as these are our last bastions of urban bushland which need to be preserved for many future generations. For years, I have walked through many of the local parks on a daily basis. In fact, I often do a 7-park walk to and from my home, taking a number of local parks. I enjoy my walks, but also get very disappointed, disheartened and angry at the lethargic mismanagement and deterioration of these parks. This Burundara Council has an obsession with concrete and steel and a love of removing trees and not replanting replacement trees. And I mean large trees and not little shrubs or bushes less than 6 metres high. I read in the Burundara Bulletin about this wonderful tree planting, but it's hot air, as your actions speak louder than your empty rhetoric. I often speak to your many groundsmen, mainly in Macleay and Myrtle Parks, as they are usually there every day attending to a sporting field in their latest vehicles and machinery. Yet outside of these sporting fields, there are only very occasional contractors who come in, race around and slash the grass. Never do they pick up rubbish, and walking tracks are never maintained or repaired, like the Northern Walking Trail that was damaged by excessive runoff during the new capital works on Oval Number 2. In Macleay and Myrtle Parks alone, there are a number of these are my daily observations, as these see as symptomatic of the problems that persist in many of Burundara's parks. An obsession with steel and concrete and removal of trees for a bike path. Maud Street, just to the north, is a much better alternative for safe passage between Balwyn and Burke Roads. There are hundreds of students who cross over this proposed bike path. What about the vast number of true locals who actually walk in, around and out of the parks morning, noon and night, 7 days a week, many of whom are elderly and unable to jump out of a cyclist's way? This bike path proposal is very ill-conceived and a poorly thought-out plan that jeopardises the safety of the majority of the true locals, park users. No proactive track maintenance, thank you, particularly where there are many exposed tree roots and regular flooding, building up of the tracks to cover the roots high enough to allow water to run off. This council needs to balance their budget to stop spending 90% of the budget on sporting ovals and clubs and only 10% of the remaining parts and fringes of the park. Parks management and future investment should not be measured by how many playgrounds and pavilions can be erected. Instead, invest heavily on trees that will grow over 6 metres and create avenues of trees along walking tracks for fresh air and sunshade for walking. Create more pockets of urban bushland within these parks and stop these parks becoming concrete freeways for cyclists. I want to feel safe walking our parks, and I want to see them preserved for bushland for many generations to come.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have a query from Councillor Franco.
Certainly.
Thanks, Mr. Daly. You mentioned that you're opposed to the concrete bicycle path, but are you aware and did you hear the response from the relevant director earlier that the paths are not to be in concrete but to be unsealed?
I applaud that because often when I'm walking down along around Macleay and Myrtle Parks every morning, I can hear a bike coming on a gravel track, and I'm very pleased to hear that, because where there are sections on concrete, I don't hear it and I don't jump, and in 3 years I've yet to be dinged, to be asked to move out of the way. I don't mind being dinged, I don't want to be hit.
Okay. Another question. Are you suggesting we should ban cyclists from the parks?
Not at all.
Because
No, not at all. Casual cyclists are fine, and there's many do come through there. A lot of students go to Balwyn High School and Primary School. A lot on electric scooters or electric bikes now that go very fast, and I can hear them coming and I turn around and I can get out of the way. But it would concern me if I can't hear them or if it becomes too many that I would be hit. I don't want to be hit at this stage. I'm sorry, I enjoy my walk, but I want everybody to be safe in the park. Particularly, and I see there's a lot of students come off the bus, Belmore Road, walk through the park, would be absolutely diagonally opposing to where this proposed bike path is going through. And yet just a few hundred metres to the north, you've got an excellent road that's flat that goes from Balwyn through to Burke. What's the matter with that?
But look, I'll leave the final question, but you're okay for the paths to remain shared paths and for safe cycling provision for students and kids and families and the like?
Definitely. I'd love to see them maintained though, because as I said, that just they've just finished the development on Oval 2, and there's been some erosion on the North Park. I've tripped and twisted my ankle on that. I don't know why, after everything else that's been done and the amount of trucks that come in there every day, why hasn't it been repaired? Why hasn't it been, in 3 years, there has not been 1 square metre or cubic metre of gravel to maintain a path?
I'd love to answer that, but it's not my role, and I'm sure the Mayor will pull me up if I try to.
I might, yes. Okay, thanks very much, Mr Daly, but officers have heard your comments.
Appreciate your help.
Thank you. So we'll now ask Mr Stensholt to come forward, and after Mr Stensholt we'll have Ian Penrose.
Thank you.
And I think this one's just in relation to the electric vehicle.
Unfortunately, my hearing aid broke outside, so if I have difficulty hearing anybody, I hope you will understand. So you'd like me to speak about the Ashburton Traders Association one?
Yes, I think that's
okay,
right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bob Stensholt, 5 Jekyll Avenue, Glen Iris. The Ashburton Traders Association appreciates the support that Council gives to shopping strips and businesses. Our association recently won the National Main Street Business Association Award, a real plus for business shopping strips in Boroondara. We welcome Council's climate plan and ask for the development of electric vehicle charging stations in shopping centres, including Ashburton. We have suggested that the first one be besides the public facility, which is power. There'll be other sites in the Ashburton Shopping Centre which may well be up for consideration, such as in Wise Street or outside the Highgate Centre or the library. We look forward to the consultation that Council will have with the association and, of course, the community on this very important matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any questions, so if you'd like to return to your seat. Thank you, Mr Stensholt. Now, our next speaker is Ian Penrose, and followed by Helen Slee. So, Mr Penrose, if you could give us your name and suburb, and then you have 3 minutes.
My name is Ian Penrose. I live in Kew. Look, thank you for the opportunity to comment on your draft budget. The draft states clearly and repeatedly that population growth in Boroondara presents a challenge to the delivery and funding of council services. Yet the document fails to mention its population forecast or how it's derived. The forecast seems to come from an outside consultant who based it on how many new dwellings are expected to be built. Thus, in effect, the city's future population is being dictated by residential developers. Maybe that's how it's always been. But I believe it is now unsatisfactory. Why? Firstly, the council admits that population growth gives it a problem. Secondly, and more importantly, it impacts adversely on current residents. New subdivisions and multi-unit developments often distress neighbours who lose amenity, attractive streetscape and local heritage. It increases traffic congestion and parking problems. It puts more pressure on local services. It puts more pressure on what remains of our precious green spaces. Thirdly, and more importantly, most importantly, ongoing population growth eliminates any possibility of the city ever improving environmental sustainability, one of your key commitments. Boroondara can never reduce its environmental footprint by adding more feet. Please don't misinterpret my motives. I support a multicultural community and a more generous refugee program, and I don't want a halt upgrading of poor quality dwellings. But I challenge the presumption that the city's population and number of dwellings should continue to grow, and grow at the behest of developers, when that growth adversely impacts on current residents and prevents us from ever being a sustainable city. You may argue that council has no control, but it is not impotent. It has direct control over planning approvals of residential developments and should decide its approval based on what's in the interest of the broader community. So what do I want to change in the budget? 1, state clearly the budget's population forecast and how it's derived. It isn't there. State that the growing population is not just problematic for the council, it adversely affects current residents and makes it impossible to meet its commitment of improving sustainability. I am disturbed by your officer recommending no additions to the budget. Please stop shying away from this important and fundamental issue.
Perfect timing, thank you. I can't see any lights on, so thank you, Mr. Penrose, if you'd like to return to your seat. Thank you. And our next speaker is Helen Slee, followed by Michael Cochrane. Thanks, Ms. Slee.
Thank you. My name is Helen Slee and I live in Camberwell. I want to discuss parks, gardens and public green open space, and in particular, acquisition of new public open space. I went to the community forums earlier last year, and most of the people there were concerned about that. They want a new space. It sort of got lost in the council's final report. It is mentioned in 2.4 clause, parks and green spaces, but it's joined together with modifying existing land. And you can't, they should be separate. Modifying existing land, what is that? Taking something and turning it into a park, taking something that's being used for something else. What I'm talking about is buying more land, acquiring more land. Unfortunately, in the 1990s, surplus to requirement was the argument, and a lot of council land was sold, lost forever. I think we've got to stop making these mistakes for the future, for the next 50 years, for the next generations. We need more open space, not football fields, not basketball fields, no more bike tracks through parks. I'm talking about public garden. You can fill it with diversity of planting. You can make it a meeting place. You might even be able to revitalise Camberwell Junction, which is dying, and you're putting in parking meter, on the pavements. You've got to do something. It's an emergency. According to the ABS, 9,000 new residential buildings as apartments, I'm talking about apartments, were built over the last 10 years. That's going to grow. COVID will, die down, people will come back, migration will beef up, and more people will come here. Revenue is going into councils' pockets for rates. This should turn into public open land. I'm talking new land. I'm not talking existing. It's very important. This ward itself, the Junction ward, is bereft of it. We have a football field, but it's used by a private schools old boys association and cricket club. I'm not talking about those things. I myself benefited from the Kew Victoria Park with my son playing there, and that was great. I'm talking about a public park. Trees, diversity of planting, seating, gatherings for families, a mecca, day, night, young, old. And I think it should start in the Junction. And I think the revenue from all these high-rises that are going up, both sides of the spine of Burke Road, that should go towards it. And I think you need to start now. I don't think you can just sit, because by your own report from Urbis, we're going to need it in 2030 or 2040, which is a long, big gap, 10 years, and this is 2022. And in 2030, you'll be telling us you can't afford to buy any land. I think we've got to do it now, and I think you've got to bring us with you, us the community, to get excited about it, because there's nothing exciting about this budget. I'm sorry.
Thank
Nothing. You. Thank you.
So Councillor Franco has a question.
Thank you, Helen. I'm wondering whether you have any specific sites in mind, and I don't expect you to have, but I'm wondering if you do. And in addition, I know you mentioned modifying existing land, that you didn't want to see that as incorporated a part of the Open Space Fund, but I wonder your view on the car park in Camberwell Junction, which has been an issue and which some councillors, myself, have advocated us to restore as a park, but that's not the view of this council. And I wonder whether that's the site you may be referring to as well.
Well, it wasn't particularly, because I recognise the state government owns that land, so that's a problem. Council have less control, although their staff use it as a car park. It would be a resolution if we could get an understanding with the state government that, it's not school being used out of school, but it's more out of school being used by school during their time in classes. To find more land, I know it's a big ask. $800,000 a year seems to be set aside to buy public land. That would buy you a fifth of a house block in Camberwell. It's nothing. It's not serious. So it would be nice to, it's hard in a built-up area. I have some thoughts, but I'd rather not say, but I think the council should seriously look at it, as an urgent thing. That's my opinion, because I'm not thinking of myself. I'm thinking of, in 50 years, what's it going to look like? And you're going to have a lot of apartments. Yeah.
Councillor Franco,
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, for your presentation. Understanding, just picking up from your last point, do you have a sense as to what scale or quantum councils should be looking at, given the cost of land in the junction?
I think, actually the community, the Camberwell Junction, that place, or there's something on at the moment for upgrading the Camberwell Junction, and community have put input into that, and it's overwhelmingly asking for trees and green space. That's just the Camberwell Junction. That's online on your web right now. There is a park called Brinsley Nature Reserve. Now, I don't know if that's councils, but something to the size of that. It's right now, that place is full of mature trees and nothing else. I'm not saying that's necessarily the one, but I'm thinking that would be big enough to do a small botanical garden that would become a mecca for, we don't have something like that. Unfortunately, we don't. and I wish we did. So that's the sort of size, and that's in Brinsley Street, but I'm not saying that particular site, but I'm saying Camberwell Junction because it is so built up. Also, here's the Civic Centre. It's the centre of Boroondara. The perimeters have the Yarra and they have Gardeners Creek. So they have the open land as a result of those, the floodplains really. So it became undeveloped as a result, and they're beautiful. But for example, during COVID, people looked with envy at golf courses, and when Studley Grounds golf course was open,
I think you've probably answered
it's fantastic. So we need something. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, you've no more?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms Salou, for your presentation. I just wanted to ask, are you aware that in Boroondara we do have Marinara Botanical Gardens?
Yes, I know, but that's a long way away, and actually public transport is not well suited to go across there, through the city of Boroondara, and I'm thinking more local, because yes, that's well serviced, Balwyn, and they've got the Yarra there, and they've got Hayes Paddock, and Kew is well serviced. I think this centre of Boroondara needs something. So I do live in this area, but it's not just for me actually, because that's where all the developments are going. This is where all the apartments are going. Yeah.
I understand your concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms Slee.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Michael Cochrane, who I believe is speaking about Kew Football Club, and that he will be followed by Mr Stensholt, who is speaking on another matter. Thank you, Mr Cochrane. If you could give us your name and suburb, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Michael Cochrane, I'm the president of the Kew Football Club, and this evening I'm joined by a few leaders and representatives of our club's women's football program. Up the back there in our Kew Football Club gear, Michaela Harding, Ruby Young, Emma Turner, Von Parker, Emma Avery, one of our coaches. I also have Michael Henderson, who's sitting in on this meeting and can answer any technical questions. He's the club's project lead and has spent 10 years at council himself, and is a town planner by trade, and has been working over the last few years with council officers on this particular project. First, I'd just like to thank you for the officer's recommendation and support of this budget submission, and for the opportunity to speak this evening. Victoria Park has been the home of the Kew Football Club since 1889, and it continues to be the home of the club for all matches and training. And the club has a strategic plan which specifically calls out the club's commitment to providing a strong, safe and inclusive environment for both men's and women's football, which allows coaches, administrators, sponsors, volunteers and supporters to enjoy the game and achieve their sporting goals in a community club environment. In 2022, the club is fielding 2 female and 4 male teams, and we expect from as early as next year the club may have the numbers to field 3 women's sides. And the Kew Football Club has a proud reputation really for being one of the pioneers of senior women's football in Boroondara. It founded its women's program back in 2014, before many other clubs, and actually before the women's VAFA competition was even established. So since its inception, hundreds of females have represented the club, and that growth continues and has no signs of slowing. The Kew Football Club was also recently asked to be one of only 2 VAFA clubs out of about 70-odd VAFA clubs to participate in AFL Victoria's Gender Equity and Inclusive Clubs pilot program, which probably shows you the maturity of our club's women's program. The club's provided a fairly detailed submission, and council officers have also provided their extensive commentary as part of their recommendation and support of the submission. Don't intend to go over all of that again, and nor will I have the time, but just to briefly expand on a few key points. At its heart, this project will increase the size of the South Oval at Victoria Park so that the VAFA can fixture senior female football matches on the Oval. In doing so, as noted in the Director's comments of Council's report, this will support an identified and continued growth in female football, both for matches and training, as well as contributing to the needs of other tenant clubs at Victoria Park.
You'll need to wind up very quickly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not just football, as well as providing for improved community use outside of just the club's use requirements. The project's very unique in that we're really 3 years in. We've worked very closely with council officers. A number of pre-works and site investigations have already been completed, as is community consultation for an initial scope.
Thank you, Mr Cochrane. I'll have to ask you to stop there.
No,
but thank you. I think we've got the general idea. Thank you. I can't see any lights on, so thank you. And if you'd like to return to your seat.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now we've got Mr Stensholt, who's presenting on behalf of Hartwell Association, followed by Christina Brannigan. So, Mr Stensholt, I think you know the routine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Hartwell Association of Residents and Traders, or HART, welcomes the support of Council for our proposed community resilience wall and thanks officers for their recommendation that funds be allocated for the wall within this budget. Our association can contribute $7,000 towards the wall's construction costs, and a committee headed by the ward councillor will organise its painting with the help of many in the community, and I welcome all councillors to help participate in the painting of the wall. It'll be a great community project. The second issue that HART wishes to raise is the proposed anniversary trail over Toorak Road besides the railway bridge. While residents would prefer it was on the eastern side, they would at the very least like to be consulted on the design and project implementation. There were genuine concerns about privacy, and this should not simply be solved by walling the residents in behind high trellis and fencing, or by wanton clear felling of existing trees that will create a noise problem. No consultation has occurred, and there must be some, and but it is timely and also comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Stensholt. And Councillor Thompson has a question.
Thanks. Mr Stensholt, are you aware the state government's doing detailed design on the Toorak Bridge?
Yes, you note that in our submission we said they've allocated was it $600,000 or $800,000. I've approached the representatives of the state government but have not heard back from them either.
So no,
on behalf of the residents who are concerned.
So no indication from the state as to whether they will consult?
No, all we've seen is there's been some people with theodolites, but that's all we've seen, but no one's talked to any of the residents.
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Thanks, Mr Stensholt.
Can I?
Oh, sorry. I've just noticed Councillor Franco's put his light on.
Just to be clear, Mr Stensholt, are you in support of the bridge, or is HART in support of this cycling and pedestrian bridge, or not?
All right, so be quite clear about that, and I think I've answered this question a couple of years ago, is that the association and the businesses in the Strip are quite supportive of this, because this will take the bikes, which continue to ride along the footpath in front of cafes. And this also occurs in Ashburton, I might add, but there's no real solution for that. In terms of residents affected, they would prefer it to be on the other side of the railway line, which they think is possible. But in any case, appropriate mechanisms in order to protect their privacy should be considered, as well as not necessarily cutting down every possible tree within on the verge. So there are views of the residents, but generally speaking, the businesses, obviously, on the pedestrians and users of the Strip are in favour. And of course, we welcome you chairing the committee to do the resilience wall, Councillor.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Stensholt. So our next speaker is Christina Brannigan, and followed by Benjamin Chesler. So thank you, Ms Brannigan. If you could give us your name and suburb, please.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name's Christina Brannigan. I live in Brinsley Road in Camberwell. Tonight I'm proposing that Council sets aside more funds and adopts performance measures to deliver all of the heritage strategies in its Community Plan of 2021 and the Heritage Action Plan of 2016. There don't seem to be provisions for several of these things currently, and heritage was recognised as a priority under Theme 4. And I'm experiencing firsthand in my own heritage precinct the long-term risk to the streetscape should Council not set aside funds for heritage activities outside of gap studies. I really don't think we can wait if we're serious about heritage conservation in the city. I'm asking also that funds are set aside for a heritage officer role or department, and this isn't uncommon in other councils. This role would straddle a number of council departments, including planning, arts and culture, library services, etc. Currently, there are no provisions in the budget for resources to deliver on a number of strategies, and these include 4.2, which promises community heritage education. There are no activities proposed in the new budget for community education, despite the fact that many other councils do deliver this. 4.3, that development does not adversely impact heritage via controls set out in the planning scheme. At the moment, there are no activities or measures proposed within the budget to review the planning scheme, despite the fact that other heritage-rich councils do have some better and stronger clauses in their planning schemes. 4.5, which is about advocacy to the state government for changes. At the moment, there seem to be no heritage targets or measures relating to this. And in addition, there are no resources in the budget allocated for several of the adopted activities in the 2016 Action Plan. And these include that the plan stated that Council will prepare a heritage communication strategy to guide a programme of interpretive signs, plaques, walks and other promotional activities. It said that Council would prepare a set of heritage design guidelines to assist planning permit applicants, and it promised staff training and improved access to information about history and heritage via Council's website. These things are all crucial and best practice activities for long-term conservation. In fact, there's only one measure of success specific to heritage in the 2022 budget, and that says we will measure the number of heritage planning scheme amendments considered by Council. This really is inadequate and puts all the pressure on planning. If Council sets aside adequate funds and spreads heritage responsibility and appoints a suitably expert and passionate heritage officer in addition, they could undertake many of the above activities. Could we just have a quick look at a couple of examples of other councils? So the slide up here is all accessible on the website of the City of Melbourne. They provide heritage design guides, for example, that seem pretty excellent to me. They provide a lot of clarity for owners of heritage places. They have some stronger planning scheme clauses compared to us at Burundara around, in particular, 3D protection of houses and clarifying significant versus contributory, what you can do. If we have a quick look just at the next slide.
You'll need to wrap up very quickly.
That's the City of Yarra website. They have a heritage officer. It's very quick. You can see when you look on their website a lot of information about their heritage precincts. Each of their 53 heritage precincts has a document on there. And the next slide, just to finish off, shows you at Whitehorse, who also have a heritage officer. They have a precinct guideline for every single precinct.
Now, Councillor Thompson, I think, has a question for you, and Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Ms Brannigan, for your presentation. Are you aware of any other councils that have more properties protected with a heritage overlay than Burundara?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. But I think that, you know, we're a pretty heritage-rich city, so I would expect that we would have as many as some of the other heritage. As places like Yarra, for example. I would imagine that we would have a similar number to them, but I'm only guessing.
I might get our officers to find a response to that at some point.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. Just wondering if you might be able to share that slide pack with us so I can circulate as we need. We can digest further afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms Brannigan. Can't see any more lights. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And our next speaker is Benjamin Chesler, and he's followed by Lynn Franks. So thank you, Benjamin. If you could give us your name and suburb, please.
Sure. Benjamin Chesler Glenn Iris. Mayor, councillors, officers, it is my pleasure to be here tonight to speak on the 2022-23 annual budget. Firstly, I want to thank all those involved in the development and drafting of the budget, a not insubstantial process. I particularly want to highlight the work of the Chief Financial Office, who took the time to reach out to Boroondara Youth Voice on top of their extensive financial responsibilities. My submission is primarily concerned with the consultation on the budget. While I won't just copy what I've said in submission 36, I do want to highlight a couple of points. I believe consultation on the annual budget should take place much earlier in the development process to ensure that the vision of the Boroondara Community Plan is realised. It is vital that the community has input into the selection of services and initiatives that meet their needs. The BCP can guide this budget's development. However, it is limited in, say, providing feedback on the outcomes of last year's budget to the community, highlighting new specific initiatives for council, or guiding the implementation of the BCP's strategies. Community consultation can, but effective consultation can only occur early in the budget development process, where the budget can feasibly change in response to broad community feedback. Selecting expenditure items before revenue sources, for instance, is one such suggestion that would be feasible early in development as opposed to 2 months before Council is due to adopt the budget. Early extensive consultation would also prevent capture by a few individuals, which is a concern some officers have raised. It could also identify the need for and support a variation to the rate cap to the ESC, which is a path that Council and community may decide to go down in future. I think my comments might be more useful to strategy and performance for next year's budget as opposed to councillors for this year's budget. Nonetheless, I think we should step back and think why we consult on the budget at all. Is it simply to abide by the Local Government Act and keeping officers and submitters busy for no real reason? Or is it to ensure the BCP's vision is realised for the good of the community? If it's the latter, we need to consult earlier and better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chesler. Councillor Thompson has a question for you.
I do, and thank you for your presentation, and I believe you're one of my local residents as well. We've got two budgets. One's obviously the annual budget, but we have a long-term financial strategy that accompanies it. Do you think the Boroondara Community Plan, which is a 10-year plan, should be more accurately represented in a long-term financial strategy rather than an annual budget?
I think it's useful for both. Obviously, as a longer-term vision document, it's probably more of use to the 4-year financial strategy than it is to, say, an annual budget, which focuses on specific initiatives, programs, and implementation.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. No more lights, so if you'd like to return to your seat. Thank you, Mr. Chesler. And our next presenter is Lynn Franks, I believe. And followed by Mr. Stensol, who'll be appearing for Craig Family Centre. Thank you. If you could start with your name and suburb.
My name is Joy Metam. I'm standing in thank you. My name is Joy Metam, and I'm standing in for Lynn Franks.
Thank you.
I live in Hawthorne East, and I'm a member of Lighter Footprints, a large local group that advocates for strong and coordinated action on climate crisis by all levels of government. We welcome Boroondara's Climate Emergency Declaration and its Climate Action Plan. We see the annual budget as the most important way the Council gives shape to the vision of the 4-year community plan. It is a roadmap or a strategy for realising the vision. The proposed budget fulfils the requirements of the Local Government Act and council policies for good financial management. We are concerned, however, that this approach characterises the requirements of the corporate sector working to meet the needs of customers and shareholders rather than those of a government body. Boroondara manages a budget of similar size to that of a medium-sized public company. It requires prudent decision-making to maintain sustainability of the organisation. It, however, is a very different beast to a business operating in the marketplace. Councillors are not members of the board, but are elected to represent and to take decisions that reflect the hopes and aspirations of their local community. It is in this context that we are concerned with the low level of community engagement with council matters in general and with the budget in particular. There are only 39, now 40 submissions from a population of around 180,000 residents. The question we ask is why so few people take the time and make the effort to engage with what we see as a significant statement of our democracy. In our submission, we have recommended a number of approaches to encourage greater community engagement with council matters in general and with the creation of the annual budget. In particular, we ask that consultations on the proposed budget begin at that stage in the budget cycle before council officers have formalised their bids and begun the negotiations over relative merits and priorities. Community consultation should start in the first part of the current financial year and no later than November to give time for community members to put forward proposals to and to ask questions of council officers on what should be considered in next year's budget. Leaving such consultations to April is much too late in the budget cycle when all the negotiations have been completed and there is little capacity to make anything but minor modifications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well timed. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Joy Mettam. Thank you very much. Look, I do appreciate your commentary there and representation of Lighter Footprints, and I want to acknowledge you do an amazing job. But are you aware of the Boroondara Community Plan? So in 2017, Boroondara Council embarked on...
you've got a question?
I have, but embarked on a community plan over a 10-year vision. Are you aware that there was around 12,000 people consulted during that plan?
I am aware of the community plan. I'm also aware that it's both a 10-year plan and it has a 4-year iterations. And I'm aware that that there was an extensive consultation period at that stage. I am concerned that such heavy reliance was put on survey techniques rather than more comprehensive deliberative engagement practices. Surveys are fairly unreliable. They're economic and they have the advantage that they can reach out to many people, but they also have very distinct disadvantages in identifying and exploring ideas in depth.
Thank you. Yeah,
Another question,
sorry,
Councillor
Madam Mayor,
Hollingsworth.
I just wanted to ask if you were aware that we then did a refresh of that plan in 2021 as well.
Yes, I'm aware of that. I'm aware that you do it every time there's a new council elected, every 4 years.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gold, you had a question?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Madam. Are you also aware that before this year's consultation on the budget commenced, and as part of consultation and preparation of the Community Action Plan, the Climate Action Plan, we'd actually clear some space and invite Lighter Footprints in to speak with us, and they did at length. And we did at that time put to them the question about how much do you think we should set aside for climate action within Boroondara?
And that's a question?
The question is, were you aware of that? And were you also aware that we did not get a definitive answer to that question?
I'm sorry, I can't speak on that because I'm not aware of the details of that. I understand that internal advisory body on the Climate Action Plan did speak with Lighter Footprints, but I'm not aware of the details nor how it was conducted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms Medham. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sorry, I keep missing your light. Sorry. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Joy. I wonder, I should have also asked this question of the previous speaker as I was listening, but Mr. Chesler, but do you think if we consulted earlier and more and provided greater awareness of the budget that we would get more valuable feedback? And in particular, I wonder if you consider whether we would receive more feedback on the environmental aspects of the budget, noting that environmental issues are one of the key issues that are driving our community and often raised with us, but not often in the context of the budget.
I'm concerned that you have only had 39 submissions to this budget. In a population of Boroondara, a highly educated population, a very aware population, the recent election showed you just how aware our population, how this region is aware of climate and how important it is. Now, when you look at the submissions that you've got on the budget, that is surprising. It doesn't measure up. Why aren't people here talking to you about it? I suppose I've been involved in...
I think you've probably answered the question. Thank you. Councillor Franco, did you have another one?
No, thank you. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Medham.
Thank you.
Now we've got Mr Stensold again, who's speaking on behalf of the Craig Family Centre, followed by Mr Huntley. Yep.
Right. My role as Treasurer of the Craig Family Centre, and I speak to the joint requests of the Craig Family Centre and Access Health to improve safety at the Craig Centre, especially for children. We have asked for security cameras to be installed and welcome the officer's recommendation that they be included in this year's budget. This will provide great assurance to staff, users of the centre and local residents, and will no doubt be welcomed by the police, who thought there were cameras there but then discovered that there weren't any. So, councillors should also be aware of the tragic death of a 3-year-old outside a childcare centre in the last few days. And the Craig Family Centre has a strong concern that a child might suffer a similar accident in the car park if they run out of the Craig, down the side path onto the car park. We ask that there be a gate put in at 90 degrees to the centre between the disabled car park and the entrance to ensure there is not a local tragedy. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Stensold. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Mr Stensold. 2 questions. Where was
Speak up.
Where was the tragedy?
Yep, sorry.
Where was the tragedy?
Tragedy was in Sydney, where a child ran out of the entrance to a childcare centre and got knocked over by a car.
With regards to the Craig Family Centre, are you aware if we've got any safety airlocks?
I'm sorry, councillor. Maybe the Mayor, I can hear the Mayor, but I'm finding it difficult to hear you.
Are you aware at the Craig Family Centre if we've got any safety airlocks?
A safety audit?
Airlocks.
Sorry, what? Safety what?
Airlocks.
The question is...
Apologies,
the question is whether we've got any safety airlocks?
Yes, we have those. And we close the 2 doors, and of course they're opened by green buttons. Now maybe we can change the height of those so the kids can't reach them. We've gone through several iterations to make it safer, and we do lock both doors, for example, which is say is an airlock, at the time when the children exit. but it's still very easy for the kids, particularly if the parents get distracted, to run out and run to the side and onto the road. Unfortunately, the disabled car park's only used at this stage 2 or 3 times a year, but the kids go out of the entrance to the Craig Family Centre every day. While there is a gate there, the gate's in front of them, but the kids can go, it's only a matter of 5, 10 metres to the side, and they do run out. And I've seen it happen myself. So, but we were reminded at the Craig, talking to the director today, that there was an accident in Sydney, which was very tragic, and it reminded us that we've got an issue here as well.
Thank you, Mr Stensholt. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Now, our next speaker is Mr Ian Huntley. And thank you, Mr Huntley. If you could give us your name and suburb, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name's Ian Huntley and I live in North Balwyn. Firstly, I'd like to address Macleay and Myrtle Parks. These parks are very much in need of funding for a master plan. They're in a biodiversity corridor, which are being steadily compromised, predominantly by the installation of more hard infrastructure for sporting activity. Balance in use needs to be maintained, and it hasn't been. The worst aspects contained in the proposed expansion of netball facilities federally funded last year appear to have been seen off. It was Councillor Sinfield, I think, who observed at the time that a master planning process should be given some priority at Macleay and Myrtle Parks. The major threat with which we are now confronted is the deployment of transport infrastructure through these neighbouring parks in the form of a network cycle corridor, which would put at risk the use by residents of this area for passive recreation, in very large numbers of them. It would be only through a master plan that the future of these parks could be made more certain. It would potentially open up the area to significantly greater planting of trees and other vegetation, and the development of walking paths that are fit for purpose, as well as being properly maintained. On the second issue of the maintenance of gravel paths, these, as I've pointed out in previous budget submissions, have been underfunded for many years. It is particularly evident in Hayes Paddock. I recently circulated, you might recall, councillors, photographs which demonstrate that paths constructed to 1.7 metres in width are now in places sprawling to 5 metres in width. This is the legacy of poor maintenance over more than a decade. The third point I'd like to make relates to the Burundara bicycle strategy. Councillors, as we understand it, reviewing some elements of the strategy in the light of concerns raised by residents in the northeast of the municipality about how it would seriously compromise the future of several parks in the area. Enhanced active transport should be a priority, but not at the expense of open space exercise for transport infrastructure. We see too much of that already with the expansion of freeways. It should not be replicated for cycling, and it need not be, in my view. And just briefly, the final point I'd make is in relation to performance indicators, and it's something I've raised in past submissions on the budget as well. These quite often do not appear to be measures of performance or the achievement of objectives, but rather measures of activity. There are a number of these in the area of planning and building. For example, where one of the performance measures that is trotted out quite serially, I think, is that of the number of building approvals, for example, which basically tells us really nothing in performance terms.
Can I get you to wrap up?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't see any lights, so thank you very much, Mr Huntley.
Thank you.
So that concludes our presentations. Councillors, are there any questions for officers? No, thank you. So is anyone prepared to move a motion? There is a possible one up on the screen. Councillor Sinfield,
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? I'm not sure who was first. Councillor Hollingsworth, maybe? Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to the motion that's up on the screen? Thank you. So I'll go to you, Councillor Sinfield, to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure that too much needs to be said. I think the officer's recommendation speaks for itself. We will absolutely take on board the feedback that we've received this evening, and I thank the submitters for attending tonight and participating and engaging in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just check if anyone else wants to say anything very briefly, and then Councillor Hollingsworth, you've got your light on still.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I echo the words of Councillor Sinfield and just wanted to stress the gratitude for the presenters coming this evening and also for those that provided written submissions that weren't able to attend this evening, and just wanted to reassure everyone that we do read your presentations and listen to every word, and we certainly give every matter great consideration, and we will now all go away and do some homework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. So everyone's hands up. So that's passed unanimously. Thank you. So we have come to general business. Councillors, are there any items of general business? Thank you. Any items of urgent business? Thank you. Confidential business? Thank you very much. So there's no items. So we are now at the end of our proceedings. And if I could thank everyone for attending, and particularly those who presented to us and the members of the Burundara Youth Voice. Thank you for joining us this evening. And I wish everyone good health and stay well, and declare the meeting closed just coming up for 8 p.m. Thank you very much.